friends, today I'm so excited for this conversation on the GoodHard Story Podcast because Matt and Ginny Mooney are with us today. Matt and Ginny are the founders of 99 Balloons, which is an amazing parachurch organization that is getting people with and without disabilities together in the same space. You can imagine why I absolutely love their organization. The Mooneys are parents of 4 kids. Their eldest, Elliot, is in heaven, 2 biological, typically able-bodied kids, and an adopted daughter with profound disabilities. We'll unpack that story in just a moment. The Mooneys are living lives they never imagined living, I imagine, especially when it comes to parenting. Listeners, if you are searching for insights from other parents who are caregiving for a child with disabilities, this episode is for you. So, Matt and Ginny, you guys have been caregivers in several ways through the years. Your son, Elliot, who was born with trisomy 18, your 2 typical children who no doubt also require significant care to grow and thrive in this world, and to an adopted daughter, Lena. Will you tell us about your story of parenting, from losing Elliot to having 2 kids biologically and to adopting Lena? I would love to know any and all things you would like to say about that.
Oh my goodness. That's quite the question to start with, Catherine. I love it.
I specialize in that. I always go for the jugular right
Let's
at the top.
go. Let's dive, just dive into the deep end right away. So, when we had moved to Fayetteville for Matt to go to law school, and Matt was in law school here at the University of Arkansas, and found out we were pregnant. And when we were pregnant, we found out Elliot, we didn't know if he was a boy or girl, would have what's called trisomy 18. And really, our story, like all of our stories, had started long before that. But, all of a sudden, what our idea of parenting and caretaking would look like was going to be wildly different. And so we found out at 23 weeks, I think, that he was going to have trisomy 18. And the diagnosis for trisomy 18, part of what they said is that he might not make it to birth. So he did make it to birth. And, I could probably talk this whole podcast about just what it was like to meet him for the first time. But we did get to meet him and get to know him. And, one of the things I think of in that really tender time, which was just over 18 years ago now, is that I had prayed. One of the markers of trisomy 18 was clenched fist. And so we saw one of the things they knew, in utero, was that his fists were clenched. And so I prayed with my whole heart and being that God would unclench his fist. And that's all I knew. That's what I knew about a good life. That's what I knew about parenting and caretaking, right? Is that God would do that. And then when he came, and this is a longer story, but the short end of the story is that he came, and when I saw those fists, I didn't want them open. I wanted them just as he was. And so here he was, this beautiful, wonderful boy that was totally different than anything we ever knew. And we just loved every part of him. And yes, caretaking was wildly different. We weren't thinking about, I thinking like, in like the classes that you take about, getting ready for parenthood and that kind of stuff to the hospital,
Right.
like the classes covered like putting the car seat in. And then like when Elliot was here, it was like, we weren't thinking about a car seat. We were learning how to do his feedings and adjust a feeding tube and what life was like in the NICU and then home and all that good stuff. So caretaking took a turn, and I'll hand over to Matt there's like a lot. So we're going to start with Elliot and keep going.
There's a lot. Absolutely.
Yeah, from Elliot's life, we started our organization called 99 Balloons, and we began to know a lot of people through that in our community experiencing disability, and a lot of families. And we started a little night called Recess, which was a respite night, and that allowed us to begin to. In some ways, we'd been immersed, but in some ways, it was very quick, and it was focused on taking care of Elliot, and it was round the clock. It was different, and yet we wanted a place where we could put into practice what we believe God had taught us through Elliot. So we started this little simple, very not a big vision, not a big anything, night called Recess, and that was a way that we began to get to know about other families, about what they were experiencing, about the goods, the bads, all of it, as you well know. And in that journey, we began through our organization doing global work, and we got to go to Ukraine, and that's where we came to adopt our daughter, Lena. So Lena was, at the time that we adopted her, she was 5 years old. She was in a crib in eastern Ukraine, currently a war zone, for 23 hours of the day. It was a very difficult, hard reality that she was living. And we just felt like she seemed like the perfect person to be our daughter. And so we brought Lena home into our family. She's now 18 years old.
Almost.
Unbelievable. Almost in December. And so, all our kiddos are growing up. The other two, Hazel and Anders, are wild teens. So we got 3 teens, Catherine. One experiencing autism, and we're parents of the wild thing of that story is we now are recipients of the night that we started. We bring Lena and we bring our children to Recess, and so that is a true full circle thing, and we're super grateful for the community that we have in 99 Balloons too. So that's kind of the 3-part dance. We got introduced to this world by our son, Elliot. We began to walk and know people through 99 Balloons, and then our day-to-day life, a lot of it, big part of our family to know us now is the Lena piece. It's built around our daughter with autism.
So why did you guys decide to adopt a child with disabilities in conjunction with the Elliot piece?
So experience. I mean, we just glazed over the Elliot piece, and just gave you like the short version. But I mean, we lived day in and day out taking care of him. We cared for him around the clock. We celebrated at 4:59 every day when he was here. We had a birthday party because we didn't know if the next day was promised. And so every single day we celebrated his life. So not only did we hold him, and I like to say I got to hold him and behold him. Like I got to take in all these parts of him. So we, earlier in your question just now about caretaking, we just breezed right over it, but it was such a sacred, holy experience to care for our son, and in ways that are really, really difficult to describe. I had this moment when I was bathing him one night, and thinking about how much I loved him, and holding him and knowing that my days were numbered with him, and just the heaviness of that, but the beauty of seeing him. So I mean, there is story after story about our time with him. So then when he was gone, we were left with the quiet, right? And the deep heartache and the depths of darkness that we still taste and know 18 years later. But we were also left with like the beauty of our eyes being open to a whole new reality of glimpsing this kingdom of God in a different way. And so we didn't go, hey, now we're going to go adopt, but we did say, oh, our lives are forever changed and we are going to live out what God showed us through Elliot. And so then it just was kind of next steps. Like we had 2 biological children. We were in the work with 99 Balloons. And really, the story of of Elliot to Lena is so wild because we were just starting 99 Balloons. Really, it had been going like recess had been happening. And so we were going into people's homes and just kind of organically talking about what we do and how we want to grow it. And we had a story of recess, and then we had a story of global work. And our global partners at the time had given us this video and picture of this little girl. And we were just terrible at growing the org, because we would end these times with these people, and we would say, you know what, forget about 99 Balloons. Why don't you just pray for this little girl, because here's her reality and here's what's happening. And so what happened is then we started praying for her. And I think there's this perception with adoption and with disability, like people are like, oh, like you went out and did this great thing and, all that kind of stuff. But for us in that moment, as we were praying, like we knew that God loved her, that God made her, and that he loved her. And maybe we were part of her story and maybe we weren't, but it wasn't about us. It was about how God loved this little girl. And the question was if the Spirit was leading us to be her parents. And so, there's a tie-in all the way through that because of our journey with Elliot and what that was like and all he taught us. We were open to where God was going to lead us. But I guess that's the thread that weaves through from Elliot to Lena.
To me, it's so beautiful that essentially, pare it down, Elliot was also profoundly disabled in life. Right. And now, after his death, you sought out adopting into your family another profoundly disabled image bearer to care for. It's just so incredibly beautiful. And obviously, your ministry is glorious work. I love it so much. Mine's not that different. But that aside, the story of the family piece is just so special to me. And I would love for you to tell me, what do Lena's disabilities look like today?
Yeah. Well, depends on what day you ask. So,
right. Yes.
Lena has a litany of disabilities. She has severe autism. She has cerebral palsy. She has vision issues, and the list keeps going. And none of those were surprises. We knew she was she was nonverbal, immobile when we adopted her. They just didn't have a diagnosis because she didn't have good health care. But yeah,
she is still nonverbal today, right? She doesn't.
That's correct.
That's
I like to say she's the best nonverbal communicator you'll ever meet, because she has a way of letting you know exactly what she's thinking and feeling. But yeah, she uses the communication.
Go girl! I love that.
She can make her point just fine without words, it turns out.
Perfect.
So yeah, I mean, life with Lena is extremely many days difficult. I do not want to gloss over it. That's probably not where we live, and that's probably not the billboard that we put over our life, to be honest, all the time.
Yes.
But the reality, we don't shy away from that. The reality, I mean, it's very difficult. Where we go to dinner, where we hang out with friends, it's all dictated on how Lena's day's going, how she's doing.
Right, of course it is. Yeah.
I will say, just side note, just a hope to any parents out there, like, probably the last 6 months has just been the sweetest season for Lena. Like, Ginny and I kind of look at each other and are like, well, we didn't see this coming. I think this might be her happy. It's just not exactly a common experience in the household. So, so she is in a sweet season, but most of her time in her house has been us whack-a-mole with trying to figure the next thing out, trying to maybe it's physical, maybe it's emotional. For Lena, one really difficult season of our experience with her was right when COVID kind of shut down her routine of school, which she really loves her routine, and school is a really great place for her. Shut that down. She also had puberty, so I don't know if you know about puberty and autism, but apparently
and teenage girls
in general, right? Much less if you can't talk about what's happening.
So that there have been very, our other two kiddos. They live in this house where one person kind of dictates a lot of things. And so there's things that we navigate with them, and they're beautiful, wonderful, loving, and they love her and would, do anything for her. But all of that, like, there are, just like any family, there are difficult days. There are beautiful, wonderful days. We celebrate really small victories. And we try to live out the things that we really do believe God taught us through Elliot's life.
Well, and Lena is spectacular. I mean, she's just the most incredible person. And I think a lot of times from the outside looking in, people can see caretaking and what it's like to care for her and her emotional life and, the way that she engages with the world. And I think the number one thing we get as far as people's response to us caring for Lena is pity. That's the number one thing. And I'm always just sort of like blown away by that, because it's terribly challenging. But the challenging part of caring for Lena is a world not made for her. The challenging part is that I'm not understanding all that she's having to say. It's not her, and so we just feel like I time and time again from the very beginning, in ways that honestly, I just can't always articulate. I feel like we get to see this incredible human. It's like a secret. Like we get to see it and experience it. It's so beautiful. Not despite all the things that are hard, right? Not around it, but right through it, right in the middle of it. I mean, this week, she had a really difficult time on Monday, Catherine. Okay. She comes home. There is a car parked in the street that isn't usually there. And
that's enough.
It was hard, and it was so sad, and it was really difficult to deal with. It was so sad. The whole thing was just heartbreaking because she was so disappointed. She was so upset. That looks a very specific way with her and how she moves her body in space and time. But what we got to see through that and through all of this that happens often, we got to see someone who was so disappointed, but we got to love her through it. We got to be there with her. We got to help her the next day. So we just get to walk through all of this life with her.
And we got to ask that truck to park somewhere.
Yeah. I bet. Oh, I bet. Well, I just love how realistic y'all are about the hard and good of all of it with caretaking with Lena. And I would love to ask you, what is the most difficult part of being caregivers in this season? And get as real as you want to here, or if you're like, I'm not feeling it, I'm not answering that. That's cool too.
No, I mean, we'll put it out there. There's probably some competing things, so I'll shuffle the cards. But I mean, I think Lena at 18, and I think the minute that you have a sweet season, so we've done all this work to get these things working. Okay, school is going well. She likes it. Oh my goodness, unbelievable. I think, she seems to be doing well. As soon as you have that feeling, which took us, whatever years, 13,
decade, yeah.
13 to get to, then, you at this stage, this is a real stage for families experiencing disability like we do, which is like, what does Lena's future look like? Because our desire for Lena is that she is known and she is in a community of people who love her. And if she's not there, they miss her. And so our whole life is built around reminding our community that Lena and all of our friends with disability that we know, they're 99 balloons, that their lives matter and they need to be known and they need to be in community. A community whereby if they're not there, they're missed and they're sought after. And so that to me, we live in that. We that is our daily, we wake up, we go to sleep thinking about that for Lena or some other friend that we're working on behalf of. But I think that would be what I would say.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I mean, any parent listening of a child experiencing disability, you get to close to 18 and it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
Right.
Adulthood is a whole thing. We had about 18 months. So it would have been not this past summer, the one before, about 18 months before 18. I had a call from like a coordinator at an insurance company, anyway, that we deal with, and all. And she says, this is just your reminder that you're 18 months out till she turns 18, and had this whole spiel. And I was like, okay, Deb, I know, like I got it.
Yeah.
Didn't worry about that.
I've been thinking about it for a long time, and then we have we had like a transition meeting with her pediatrician, and she looked at me and she said, okay, what's next? And I'm like, I don't know. I think that there's no matter how deep you are in it, if it catches you by surprise or you've thought about it for years, there's going to come a time where there's a shift to adulthood, because prior to now, Lena's life has looked like her peers, right? She has gone into school.
Right.
It has looked like, and then there's a pivot. Lena's not going to, and for some of our friends with disability, they'll go to college or have programs. They might, have work, that sort of thing. Lena's probably not going into the workforce, and she is not, and probably not going to college. And so what does life and community and relationships and all these things that we long for and desire, what does that look like for her? And for most, it is the parent or guardian trying to figure that out. And so that is the great unknown. I'm not scared of it. And I actually think like it's so, in ways we could not have conjured, Catherine. Like, Elliot would have been 18 this summer. Lena's about to be 18. And at Nine on Balloons, like, we really have dove into what adulthood looks like, and what does it look like to come alongside. And we have a program called Befriend. So is it called to befriend our adult friends with disability? And for whatever reason, like, our walking through all of this right now, it is like, okay, all these things, I see great things that are happening for Lena. At the end of the day, maybe they last an hour. Maybe they give her support in a short amount of time. And at the end of the day, it's Lena and I in her room reading books. How do we get her to where she is missed in other spaces? So that's the big question, the big adult transition question we're living it and dreaming about it.
Yeah. I would say in my work in the disability space, that would be the number one concern of every parent, above all others, above every IEP issue and every toileting problem. And everything is what's going to happen when they're 18. And the social circles are shrinking, and paid caregivers and aging parents can very frequently be the only peer group. And it's a tragedy and a nightmare. And we are trying to speak into it a tiny bit with our coffee shop, employing people with disabilities.
Ginny got to go recently.
Did y'all go?
I did. I actually got stuck in Atlanta with the cyber outage this summer.
Oh my
and
gosh,
I couldn't go anywhere. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go to Mend, and I got to go see it.
I love that so much. Well, it's a beautiful concept that we hope really catches on, that we pay someone who has no use of arms or legs to be a greeter at our coffee shop, but we pay them the same wage we pay the barista.
Love it.
And that model is really kind of a statement of the value not connected to ability. And I'm just throwing it out there. Lena potentially could get a job with us. And
All right.
we might just love that.
Catherine, look, I'm not afraid to move to Atlanta.
Oh, well, hey. So I want to ask, have the two of you ever been on different pages when it comes to caring for Lena? And how do you resolve those conflicts? Sorry,
Nope, we never struggle with that. No, never been an issue.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
I think that so we had been married when we had and lost Elliot. We'd been married 5 years, and the first 5 years of marriage we sailed through. Believe it or not, that's not everybody's story, but we enjoyed one another, and Jenny had me as arm candy, so it was working. But the first 5 years, were working. And then, so our first experience of being on different pages was grief. And we were on every day was a wildly different story. And we learned pretty quick about each other. Hey, if I'm having a good day in my grief journey and Ginny's not having a good day, or vice versa, then I'm not having a good day.
Both having.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
we certainly are, the statistically, our marriage, is in this like danger zone, like red siren. So,
Oh, yeah.
just for your marriage to make it is, statistically not great chances. Then if you lose a child, everybody lets you know, like, hey, just to let you know that makes your percentage lower. To have a child with significant disability, hey, just so you're aware that. So I think, we go to therapy. We are big fans of therapy. We have a lot of support in our community. We have a lot of help. We are not always on the same page in anything, including our daughter or our other kids or how we're doing life. But I think God's grace to us in that has been, and it started again back with going through grief. God's grace to us was always that, like, like being apart, that isn't the problem, and it isn't going to make things better. God's grace to us has been, hey, this isn't easy. This life that now we've chosen a little bit, it got thrusted upon us, and now we've actually chosen. It isn't always easy, and marriage isn't always easy. But getting through we're this side note, we are very bad as a culture and as a society of filling in the blank of what is a good life. Okay, what is a good life?
Yeah.
And then seeking after that good life. You could say, what is a good marriage? And see, what is a good family? And seeking after that. We're very bad as a culture and a society. Like, when we get our way, we end up not being happy. And so, I think the thing that's kind of hanging over from the question that you asked earlier, whether we're talking about our marriage or our family, is, I think through Elliot, we saw that something we never would have chosen and we never would have picked. And if God would have answered my prayers on the floor, bawling, crying before him, my son would be here, right? And so he and I will take that up, and we'll talk about that in eternity. And so I'm not putting a bow on it, but in things, in suffering and in pain and in things we would have never chosen to happen, God has still been good to us, Catherine. And God has still shown us his beauty. And so we began to orient our life and our marriage towards ways that we would not otherwise have chosen but for Jesus. And that does not, see, what people want to do with that is people want to think we're great. Hang out with me for 10 minutes. You'll figure out real fast. There's nothing great here. Ginny is great. But there's nothing to put us on a pedestal because we adopted Lena. Somebody in our story asked us, and I actually loved the question. Why, after so much pain, would you choose pain? Right. And now, in some ways, I kind of want to grab the person by the throat. And in other ways, I'm like, you know what? This person's just asking what a lot of people are not bold enough to actually say. And I get it. Like, this is not what we would have thought life looked like. But when you begin to orient your life around a different definition of what a good life is, a good family is, right? If we just go by the script that's handed to us by society, all we think is a good life is how good can I navigate away from pain and suffering? that's actually not where you find the good life that Christ has for us. And so that's what I think we've learned. Somehow that marriage that's what we believe in our marriage. And I think that's what keeps us moving together a little bit.
Well, and in the early days, right after, like, I remember how intensely different grief journey was for both of us. And we were really struggling. And I remember sitting down to a coffee or a lunch at this little table, and both of us just kind of knew, and we're talking through how different it was, but we also just said, but it's better together. It's actually better together. And we were fighting this like message that was like, when things are hard, you run. When things are hard, you numb the pain, right? That's what you do. You push away from it. And it was like in that, like, I can't remember where we were, but I remember what the table was like and how I felt in the moment, like all those things. And we just had said, no, it's going to be hard. But if we've learned anything from Elliot, it's that it's actually better together, and we're not going to be scared of the hard because of all the good that Jesus does all through it.
Oh, wow. That's so beautiful. I'm very struck by this notion, Matt, of the good life and what is the good life, because I think largely before I had my stroke as a 26-year-old, I had only known the quote unquote good life that was then ripped away from me post stroke. And the reality was I had misidentified a good life as a charmed life in many ways, in a life that I dare not use the word blessed for 10,000 reasons, but a life that was largely pain-free, that is what a good life looks like. The notion of a good life, including pain, was something I didn't have a category for. That was not in the American experience in our modern world of reality, that pain is the opposite of the good story. And you know what is so fascinating to me about y'all opting into adoption post loss of Elliot, much less opting into adoption of a child with profound disabilities, is that I see this so much through Hope Hills Camp and through disability spaces I'm in, is that families where there is already a biological child with a disability of some kind, or a loss, as y'all experienced, or something that would be quote unquote decidedly not good in the story, that there is adoption that is also in the story. And in my mind, I've always begun to unpack that in my head and heart as, well, you know what? We're already doing really hard things, so let's just slap on some more hard things. And the capacity is great because we've had to endure greatly, so we got this. And I think that is part of it for sure. But I think actually what is even more true is exactly what you're saying, Matt, that because you no longer are buying into the lie that pain-free living is the only way to experience joy within a family, and that the families living with adoptive children, I mean, many out of the foster system, in addition to a child with disabilities in the home. I mean, just really beautiful, redemptive work of family looks different than we thought, but it is profoundly good. Heart stop. That is really a message for our world, trying to make everything that's good fit into a very specific box. What family life should look like if it's a good family. Like, that's so ludicrous.
Yeah.
So I think you're really right, and I'm very, very struck by your family. I wanted to ask you about how you are involving your non-disabled children into caregiving for their sister, and specifically what you expect of them and what do you not expect of them when it comes to Lena's care.
It's a great question.
Siblings, early on in 99 Balloons, when we were doing recess, early on, it was very important for us to do a whole sibling track. So as we provide respite with 99 Balloons, we look at the whole family. And so we were already, bless our kids' hearts, as they say in the South, we were already prior to adopting Lena and having her in our family. We already had seen a lot of the research. We already knew a lot of the things, but it's totally different to know it, and then to live it, right? and really, I think one of the things that I would say is we look at each of so the two non-disabled children in our family, they are wildly different from each other, right? So wildly.
Yeah.
And so how each of them engage and connect to our family dynamic and in general, but also with Lena, is wildly different based on who they are. So regardless of what kind of things you've read, any kind of there's great things out there about siblings. When it comes down to it, it is about each one of them and their individual journeys. I mean, we are big proponents of allowing them to talk realistically. Back to the story, just real life, real time here. The story on Monday, our son was there for a lot of that and was helping her through that hard time. And so when we first started to process it afterwards, when it had all calmed down, he kept saying, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. And I made him pause and I said, you know what? You are okay, but it is also okay to say that was really hard. That is not ideal. That's really difficult. And here's how it feels in my body as I'm thinking about that. He just wanted to say, I'm okay. He wants to make everything, okay. And I said, no, it's okay to say that it's hard. So we really want to shepherd our kids, probably more than they even want to. We're always like, hey, let's talk about it. Hey, let's talk about it. And they're like, guys, we're fine.
Definitely more than they want to. I think we've tried to set the temperature. We had known the research, so I think we had tried to set the temperature in our family. Is it's okay to say, I hate it when Lena does this, right? Because they intuit that nobody in the world ever talks bad about their sibling with disability. They intuit that, we can't talk about it. Oh, nope, everybody just acts like she's perfect, even though she's making a big ruckus in here, right? So the world doesn't know how to react. So they sense that. So we've tried to teach them, like, we love Lena. At the end of the day, we're going to love her no matter what she does. We're not that love's not coming or going. She's going to go to bed loved. It's also okay to say, boy, that really sucked when we were in a restaurant and everybody was looking at us because she was banging on the table, screaming, pounding her feet and crying. We don't have to act like that. That's not great, and so we try to set that temperature and we try to go through that together. I think one beautiful thing, research would say that kids start worrying about their sibling's future if their sibling has significant disabilities, around the age of like 9 or 10. They start to figure out like, this is going to be me. Like, very young, they start to think about what does their sibling's future and as an adult look like, and what does that mean for their life? And we know that research. So I'll be kind of asking my kids, like, if they're concerned or what are they thinking, and I'm kind of deeply probing. And for the longest time, I would go to Ginny and I'd be like, I don't think they're worried. Like and then it took me a very long time, to years, to come to this place where I was like, oh, like they live in a weird world because we are in the 99 Balloons community, because we are in this community of people that we've built. They don't foresee a lot of the problems because Lena is known. Lena is at things. People love Lena. So some of those concerns wash away when you're immersed in a community that does love. And I've just seen that be true with them of like, yeah, I mean, she's okay. She's known she's going to be good. And certainly they can see that the future has some caretaking roles in it, but some of that stress is taken away by living in community. And we're an outlier in that way. We've put our whole life into having that around us.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. I'm definitely struck. First of all, let me tell you that, and I know everybody wants to do this, so it's probably annoying, but tell you how awesome it is for the typical siblings. But I have to echo it because it's just the truth. The typical siblings are just processing at a very deep level. And I don't know, I can't say enough in all the years of, and I mean, for camp, as the last summer, we moved there for a full month. I'm interacting with a very large amount of typical siblings. And it's just different. It's just the conversation is different. There is a maturity and a just a wrestling with darkness that is so beautiful. I must tell you, it's glorious. So I'm sure there's 10,000 annoying things about your kids, but at least in my eyes, whoa, it's yeah, I have to believe that my disabilities for my typically able-bodied children are really going to enhance who they are as people long term, truly. And I see that with typical siblings, truly. There is an enhancement to their journey and
Well,
complicated, no doubt.
and similar with grief. I mean, I remember where I was when I was pregnant with Hazel, and she's 16, so she was, about 2 years. This was about 2 years after we had lost Elliot. And I was walking around the park, and I was so struck, like so sad that she would be kind of born into grief. Like she had a brother that she didn't know. She was going to know about loss long before kids usually even consider it. And I was so sad. And as I processed through that, I felt the Spirit leading me to like, hey, this is actually, she's going to have maybe a deeper understanding of the gospel, which is really all we all need. Right. And so kind of saying something that I framed up, just like we've been saying, like we've been talking about what the good life is. I wanted for her a life free of pain. And I felt like the Spirit was like, no, actually, she's going to be born into an understanding of grief that's going to actually show her the kingdom of God. The reality is that's really hard to live. That's hard to live out, right? Like I'm struggle with that. I don't just, raw pain.
Of course.
But that, I mean, are the siblings, the typically developing kids we have, they are seeing a hard life constantly, and they are gauging. And I'm really hopeful that God is showing them the gospel and showing them what a real good life is.
Amen. That is so beautiful. In real time, back at you right after we get off this podcast, I have a dear friend coming over for a luncheon because today is the 1 year anniversary of her 14-year-old son dying. John Stone, I don't know if you ever met the Stone family at Hope Hills Camp, Mead and Mary Elizabeth Stone. They had a son, John Stone, who's now in heaven, who died a year ago today. And they have 3 boys at their home right now, alive. They have actually another son who's in heaven. There was a rare genetic disorder that both boys had. And John was profoundly disabled, similar in some ways to Lena, nonverbal, non-mobile. And, today we will sit around this table and just celebrate John's life. And I would love to hear from you all, if you're willing, what would be most helpful to say to Mary Elizabeth's heart today. And I know it's always a tension of how do you honor the living siblings and celebrate the sibling that passed, and disabilities in their story as well. And I would just love your advice on how to best minister. Because honestly, I don't know. We have a whole ministry about giving hope, and I don't have a clue how to do it well. So I'd love your help.
Isn't that funny? Like people ask me all the time, and even as you say it, I sit here and I'm a little choked up with you. On Sunday, it'll be 18 years since Elliot passed away.
Oh, wow.
And so we're right in this like season, and I go, shouldn't I know what to tell you after 18 years, Catherine? You would think I would. But the two things that pop into my mind is one, that you're there with her, and I think presence is everything. And we forget, like I think we want to do so much that we forget that presence is such a gift. And there are people that go away. And that's really hard. It is. It's hard that people around you, but then there are those that don't go away, that stay, and that they're present year after year. And I would say, a lot of times when we hear of people in our community that have experienced deep loss, I go into my calendar and I mark way far out, because I know a lot of people are going to show up early, but who's going to show up a year later? Like you are today? Yes. Who's going to show up 10 years later? And then 18 years later, who's going to say, look, I know the pain has shifted, but I know that it's just as hard that he's not here 18 years later. And so I think that presence, and then the longevity of presence, is huge.
There is no question that we've been asked more than, what do I say? What book do I buy? What casserole do I make for this situation, right? Of loss or of diagnosis of, what do we do? But first of all, you're the leading voice in this, certainly. So I'm going to get behind you, but
me, please. Yeah, right.
You are opening your doors. You are not providing answers. You are not putting a bumper sticker, because there's so many things that we do. And I don't blame anybody for this, because chief person doing it, so many things that we do in that situation we don't want to experience that pain. And so what you can do is come alongside someone and taste that with them. You won't taste it in as deep of a way, but that's all you can do. All you can do is open your table, open your door, and say, I'm going to come alongside you in this pain. Everybody knows, everybody that on this side, that the people that are experiencing the loss, they know very clearly that's not an easy thing for you to do, and you'd rather avoid it. Like, we get that. Everybody gets that. So anybody that overcomes the obstacle and says, you know what, I'm just willing to sit in this pain with you, not provide an answer, not provide the perfect book, not wiggle out of the awkwardness of, some days are just really difficult and hard, but I wanted to be alongside of you in it.
That's so beautiful. I'm really struck, Ginny, by you saying you'll pull out the calendar and write something for much later, because our precious friends, the Stones, who I just talked about, lost their first son, Warren, shortly after. He was 17 days after he was born, on February 8th of 2009, I think. And Sweet J. Wolf has in our calendar, if you can see, Call Stones on February 8th, 2025. I just pulled it up. And
it's beautiful.
Sweet J. Wolf, I guess, knows how much anniversaries can hit, because we're calling the Stones on February 8th, 2025.
Well done, Jay.
That you are, and I'm sure it's on every yearly, and keep doing it.
It is. Right? I think it is every year. And yes, I think that is a very important practical way. People always ask me that question as well. How do you come alongside? And very clear way is you remember and you reach out, and you get in there. People always say, I have this group of sweet, suffering friends. I call it the SOS Club. And we meet, and for sure, each one of us has had pretty major tragedy. Mary Elizabeth is in the group, actually.
Mm.
And one of the main things we all talk about is just the power of not feeling alone
Mm.
in our stuff, just the importance of feeling like I can do this because you are with me, and I can bear the pain because I'm sharing the pain. It's not alone. And I just think that is so, so important for all of us in our hardship and suffering.
Yeah.
Okay, two more questions for you. One, if you could travel back and speak to your younger selves when you were caring for Elliot during his short life, what would you tell those versions of Matt and Ginny?
I would have tremendous grace and tremendous tenderness for anybody that was on the precipice of walking through what we would have been about to walk through, and even for the 18 years. So, just a real, I don't know that I would aim for the right words, but really my posture would be one of just complete and total grace. The word that comes to mind for me is just a love, to try to lean into both the love of Christ and the love that you have for one another is about all I could say to those folks. I don't think I'd have a lot of words for them.
I think I have. I think it moves me so much because I'm so sad for 26-year-old Jenny. She didn't know what she was doing. She just wanted to be a mom. She just wanted to take care of her kid, and start a family. And I think I'd go back and tell her I was really proud of her. To be honest, all I knew to do was to love him, and I think that's we are still living out what it looks like to parent Elliot. Even now, we parent him and how we miss him and who we are and who God has shaped us to be. So I think I'd go back to her and just say I was proud of her for loving him so well and being present with him.
Jenny, I didn't realize you were also 26 years old
I
when
was
your world
26.
blew up.
Yeah,
You
he
were 26 years old with a new baby when your world blew up. Me too. I was
yeah
26 years old with a new baby. Yeah,
yeah
I feel you.
yeah he Elliot passed away on my 27th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And so it's always this funny part of our story. And I think
Oh, gosh.
when you hear like the anniversaries and the dates, but it actually like it's such a heavy thing. But it was one of my closest friends who actually was really instrumental in leading me to Christ in college. And she wrote me a letter after it had been like 1 year that he was gone. And she said, remembering you on the day that God chose to make all things new. And I just I get to remember that every year on my birthday, that it was the day that we said goodbye to him, but it was the day that God chose to make all things new. And we still get to live that out.
Well, now I'm like wrapped. That's so beautiful. Oh, wow. Oh, yes. He's making all things new. Excuse me. Final question for y'all. What is the best practice, rhythm, or habit you found to maintain your mental, physical, relational health among all the demands of caregiving?
You this might be where we're on different pages. So let's hear yours first.
Okay, Catherine, I could do the whole podcast just on this.
Excellent. Tell us.
I feel really strongly about it. So, brief story. When Lena had been home about 2 years, and they were also little, I had back surgery. My body pretty much fell apart, and I would say the short version of the story is I was trying to be all things for all people, and physically my body could not maintain what I was trying to do. And so that was, whether I wanted to learn the lesson or not, I had to learn that if I was going to care well and live out what I still strongly believe is my calling to care for Lena and my whole family, then I was going to have to figure out how to care for myself. And I love that when you asked that question, you listed all the things, right? Like mentally, physically,
Yeah.
emotionally, because we are all one
Relationally,
unit,
totally.
right?
Totally.
Relationally, we're all one thing. So I would say I've had to learn like significantly the hard way how all of those are intertwined. And so many of us kind of think, well, I'm pouring out, I'm pouring out, I'm pouring out. But like you've got to figure out how to take care of yourself if you're going to live out what God is calling you to do in a way that's
So the
loving your.
follow-up question, Jenny, specifically would be, what is the best practice to take care of yourself, best rhythm, habit, whatever that parents or any caregiving should do? Do you have any tip
Well,
specific? I mean,
I do think it's very personal, right? So what fills me up is going to be very
yes,
different than what fills Matt up. It's going to be very
totally.
different than what fills, like I have a group of disability moms and we all hang out, and what each one of us needs to fill up is different. So the first tip
Yes.
is actually bringing some awareness and some time to figure out what is going to fill you up versus deplete you. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, that's going to shift in different seasons completely.
What
And
has
so,
filled you up, though? You have some things. Catherine and I are waiting on you to give some specifics. We like the pep talk. What is it that you're doing? Ginny does bar 3 like a religion. I'll answer this part for her.
Okay, awesome. What is
She's
bar
be-
3? I've never
she's
heard of it.
become a teacher as well.
So it doesn't, for me, after back surgery, I started something called Bar 3. It's really like mindfulness, and their like tagline is strength and mindfulness. So it's a way of kind of combining yoga practices with movement, breath, all of that. And so for me,
Oh,
figuring
love
out my
it.
body and how I feel in my body so that I can best care for my family has really helped me. And I love helping
Yeah.
specifically for me, other moms and other women start to figure out how they could care for their physical bodies with breath and mindfulness in order to care for their families.
Oh, yeah. Big fan.
Here's
I
the
don't do bar
practicality.
3.
So I was kept waiting on it. There's like talks about it all the time. For me, I think there's things that I have and there's things that I know I need that I haven't quite figured out in the season that we're in. So uh, I alluded to it earlier, but we're big fans of therapy. I'm a big fan of getting an outside voice. It can be therapy, it can be spiritual direction, it can be a multitude of ways that you find it. For somebody outside to speak into your life is super helpful, I think, for people who are navigating very difficult things. So that's been super important to us. Physically, and I think physically is a really important part of it. I like to walk. I decided during COVID that I didn't like running. I'd been doing it my whole life. Ginny likes it. That's how I know that I hate it. And so I started walking obnoxiously fast, obnoxiously long periods of time. That's been probably good for my mental health, probably good for my
Oh, yeah.
marriage, bring back a little less energy. And then the thing that I know that I need, that I'm constantly tweaking and changing, is just I need friends, men in my life, community. And that I'm 47 years old. The days are very full. There's precious time. And when I have the precious time, the people I'd like to hang out with don't. So there's a lot of
Right.
factors in, but I'm constantly trying to figure that out a little bit better.
I think those are glorious answers. And I echo all of those actually. I don't specifically do bar 3, or actually I don't power walk because I can't do that either. But I'm a big believer in moving my body and how it changes my mental state for sure. And I'm a big believer in community coming around you to hold all of it with you. Hold it right there where you are with you. I'm a big fan of both of those, and making them habits, making it so it's part of your life. You can't live without it. And I think that's really critical. Put the oxygen mask on you first, I think is the thinking in life. And
You know,
are beautifully
I
doing that.
vividly remember that, hearing that analogy at some point in my life. I don't know if it was like college or something. And I thought, that is so selfish. That is so silly. Like, I remember thinking that was so silly. And then as I'm laid up after back surgery, hearing the kids crying and I can't move. And it was like, okay, I think my mind frame has shifted on this just a little.
Yeah. Wow. I'm sure. Goodness. Listen, our closing question on every episode of this podcast, and I would love to hear your answers, is what is good in your story? What is hard in your story? And how do you live in the tension of those in your good, hard story?
Okay. What is good in my story is that God has shown me a different way of seeing. What is hard in my story is all the ways that He has done that, that I still struggle through. And what was the last part of it?
That's it. And how do you live in the tension of
How do
your
you
good,
live in the
hard
tension?
story?
I think I live in the tension now that I have to keep fighting to believe the truth, that the hard things are, that they're good all throughout the hard things.
What a beautiful answer.
Yeah, I think we covered and what is good and hard. I think how I live in the tension is always the work left to be done and the work that I wake up in the morning to do. How do we live in the tension of that? But in our work with people with disability, there's one human story. And the truth is we're all living in the tension. It's the human story. We want to make it about people with disability, or we want to make it about poor people, or we want to make it about this or that. Because if we make it a them, then it's not us. But there's only one human experience, and we're all living in that tension together.
That's right. I completely agree. That's beautiful. Thank y'all both so much for this conversation. I'm so grateful for your vulnerability and your hearts and your wisdom. And I know this is going to be very important for so many listeners to this podcast who honestly don't know which way is up. And it's not remotely because there might be disability in the story, because they're living stories where expectations have been slaughtered of what the good life looks like, and how do we go forward, and how do we pivot in life. And I think you've provided some incredibly valuable resources in those realms. So thank you both so much.
Thank you, Catherine.
Oh, you're so welcome. Your incredible organization, 99 Balloons, should be sought out by these listeners. So please tell us how to tune in, Matt, to all things you guys.
If you want to learn more about 99 Balloons, you can go to 99balloons.org. We're easy to get a hold of. We're not big. So just go through there, figure it out. We'd love to connect with you, with your church, with whoever wants to build relationships with your community, with people experiencing disabilities.
And specifically, 99 Balloons provides resources so that churches can implement things like recess and befriend. Isn't that right?
That you got it. We work with the best folks. We work with churches who are wanting to build relationships with people with disability in their community. It's a pretty good filter. We love the people that we get to interact with. And if that's you, if you're thinking, man, we should be doing something, our community, our church, then we'd love to hear from you. So we got a beautiful team of people. We're waiting, and we'd love to help you.
Awesome. I just love you guys. I love your work and love your heart. So thank you
We
for
love
this
you.
conversation.
Thank you, Catherine. We love you. We're cheering you on.